Tibetan protesters have fought with police outside a Chinese embassy in India.
Long live Dalai Lama! China ends the occupation in Tibet!
Police in New Delhi detained the protesters who were marking the anniversary of the Tibetan National Uprising on March the 10th, 1959. Tibetans rose up against Chinese occupation. That led Tibet's spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, and his followers to go into exile in India, where they've remained ever since. For more on Tibet's National Uprising Day, we're joined by Chonpel Tsering. He is the representative of the Dalai Lama for Northern Europe, Baltic states and Poland. Chonpel, thank you so much for joining us. How important for Tibet
Thank you for having me.
is... You're very welcome. How important for Tibet is this anniversary and exactly what it represents?
Well, the 10th of March represents, or it marks the anniversary of the Tibetan people's peaceful uprising against Chinese invasion and occupation in 1959. So clearly it's a very, very important anniversary that the Tibetans worldwide observe. As you've seen, and your viewers would have seen the scenes from New Delhi, and Tibetans, as I said, all around the world mark this very important anniversary. So it's really an opportunity or a day when Tibetans commemorate and remember the brave Tibetans who have stood up to Chinese occupation, since 1959, and to actually mark that important anniversary.
Mr. Tsering, as we speak to you, we're seeing images of some pretty hostile activity going on with the protests happening in India to mark this anniversary. How is the 1959 uprising acknowledged in other parts of the world? And also, I'm curious to know how China views it.
Well, Tibetans around the world will, on this day, hold rallies, gathering outside Chinese embassies and consulates. Not just Tibetans. The Tibetan issue, the Tibetan cause has many supporters around the world. Tibetans, hand in hand with their supporters, and including some Han Chinese supporters, will observe this day around the world. So it's in terms of how the Chinese view it, the Chinese authorities clearly will look to try to control the Tibetans inside and to prevent them from marking this important date. Whereas in the last few years, and particularly since the 2008 uprisings across the Tibetan plateau, that more and more Chinese nationals have been showing an interest and a growing awareness of the Tibetan issue. So despite the Chinese authorities' best attempts to actually control information, censor information, and to actually give very distorted information about the Tibetan issue to their public, Chinese nationals have shown an ever increasing awareness and ever increasing support. So that in itself is a sign that the Tibetan issue is a just cause, which increasingly has the support of the Chinese nationals who are aware of the situation.
And how would you describe life under Chinese rule today and how that has changed over the years?
Well, there's the reality of the situation, the political situation is very, very grim and very harsh for the Tibetans. There's no scope for expressing any form of dissent, any criticism of the Chinese authorities' policies inside Tibet, even on cultural, linguistic, religious issues. Any form of disagreement with the authorities is termed in terms of national security. People who stand up for these rights are labeled as splitters, which can lead to which lead to imprisonment, harsh sentences, torture. So there is absolutely no scope for Tibetans to legally or no kind of means for them to express their views. So increasingly in the last few years we've seen over 140 Tibetans resorting to the very, very desperate and drastic action of self-immolation to actually protest the Chinese authorities' policies in Tibet. So despite the Chinese government's attempts to portray to the outside world a happy, developing, peaceful Tibet, the reality is very different. And that's as we speak, many parts of Tibet, including the capital Lhasa, are closed to the outside world. So this kind of shows clearly that the Chinese authorities have something that they are trying to hide and from the outside world.
Chonpel Tsering, thank you so much for joining us on this special day for you.